Good morning. Hope you've had a wonderful week and are keeping safe as we continue with our journey. As Abundant Life Community Church, we have been on a journey of rediscovering God this year through the Word of God, just going through the Bible, because one of the ways you get to know somebody better is through the words that he speaks. And so for us, in this journey of rediscovering God, we've been on this journey as a church, and we want to invite you to join us in this journey as we rediscover our God and who this our God is. In the last 2 weeks, we've been looking at the minor prophets. We looked at Joel 2 weeks ago. Last week, I talked about the prophet Jonah. And today I want to look at a very interesting prophet, the prophet Hosea. Now, when you look at the Bible in the Old Testament, especially the prophets, they're a very, very difficult time, because sometimes the message they were supposed to deliver was to have a life example, an illustration. And the illustration sometimes will be crazy, not like us where we just share it in terms of a story or an example. But for them, it was many times a real life illustration. I remember there's a prophet who had to sleep on one side for I think half the year, then on the other side, Jeremiah had to be thrown in a pit and do some just very, very queer things. And so today, as we look at the prophet that we're going to be looking at, the prophet Hosea, God also used him, and for him, he used his marriage and his family life to illustrate the message that he was passing to his people, the nation of Israel. Now, Hosea is the son of Beri, was a prophet of God in the northern kingdom of Israel. The kingdom of Israel had been divided into two. There was the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The southern kingdom, known as Judah, comprised of the 2 tribes of Israel. The northern kingdom had the other 10 tribes of Israel. And so Hosea is a prophet in the northern kingdom. And he lived during the same time as the prophets Isaiah and Micah. They were his contemporary, but the prophets Isaiah and Micah served the nation of Judah. They were in the southern kingdom, and they lived in sometime in the 8th century. And Hosea's prophecy or prophesied over a span of 60 years. And he was a prophet during the reign of Jeroboam II, who ruled the northern kingdom. And that is at the particular time that Hosea is giving this prophecy. The southern kingdom had Uzziah first as a king, then there was Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. And this was somewhere between 790 BC and 686 BC. And so this is the time that Hosea lives his life. And to illustrate and bring his message home, God asked Hosea to marry a prostitute. In Hosea 1 and verse 2, God tells him to go and take an unfaithful woman to be his wife. Now you can imagine a prophet, the man of God, and as a wayward wife. He has a prostitute for a wife. And so today I've entitled my sermon as A Prophet's Wife. We do expect many times the man of God to have to get a woman of God, a decent woman, the Proverbs 31 woman. But in Hosea's case, God asks him to go and take a woman of whose morals are not good, a woman of loose morals, a woman who was known to be a prostitute. And he says, go and take him. So when the Lord take her to be your wife, when the Lord began to speak through Hosea, the Lord said to him, go take yourself an adulterous wife and children of unfaithfulness, because the land is guilty of the vilest adultery in departing from the Lord. So he married Gomer, daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. And even the children have got names that are pronouncing a judgment over the nation. So this is an actual person. It's not just some imaginary thing. She was Gomer, her name was Gomer, and she was the daughter of Diblaim. And she was an adulterous woman, and her children probably through her unfaithfulness. She may have been a single mom or just a lady who had other children. So Hosea takes them in, and that becomes his wife. Imagine God asking you, man, to have such a woman to be your wife. And so that's Hosea's life. And in chapter 3, verses 1 to 5, now Hosea recounting this. Bible scholars believe that in chapter 1 is probably what has been stated, but now in chapter 3 is Hosea himself saying it. But again, other Bible scholars believe that this is another occasion. And in chapter 3, this very, very woman has left Hosea again and gone back to her prostitution. And Hosea goes after her. And the Lord said to me, Hosea is saying, go show your love to your wife again. Again, because he had done it the first time, so he's being told, go and do it again. Though she is loved by another man and is an adulteress, love her as the Lord loves the Israelites. Though they turn to other gods and love the sacred raisins, so I bought her, Hosea again speaking, so I bought her for 15 shekels of silver and about a homer and a lethek of barley. Then I told her, you are to live with me many days. You must be not be a prostitute or be intimate with any man, and I will behave the same toward you. For the Israelites will live many days without a king or prince, without sacrifice or sacred stones, without ephod or household gods. Afterward, the Israelites will return and seek the Lord their God and David their king. They will even come trembling to the Lord and to his blessings in the last days. So Hosea goes back to bring back this wayward wife. He can imagine Hosea is in the queue, going to those areas where these people are known to operate. Hosea is also among these people, and he's queuing for them with other men who are going to pay his wife to have sex with her. And so Hosea goes in and this time buys her back with 15 shekels of silver. The story of Hosea and his wife and is to illustrate God's love for a wayward, adulterous people, the nation of Israel. In fact, so many times in the Bible, adultery is linked very closely to idolatry. So these people forsake their God and go after other gods. Just like Gomer forsakes her husband, leaves her husband and goes to commit, to prostitute herself or to sleep with other men. She is unfaithful to her husband. What a difficult thing for Hosea to, he has to go back and bring her back again. But this is illustrating just how what the nation of Israel was doing to their husband, who is God himself. And so they will go and forget about God and begin to worship the idols or other gods. Forgetting the very first commandment that God gave them through his servant Moses, that thou shalt, in Exodus 20 and verse 3, thou shalt have no other God before me. He was to be. And so these guys go after other gods, worshipping them contrary to the very commands of God. And it's very, very easy for us in today's day and age to, look back and think, how could they do that? It's very, very easy. I happen to have lived in India, where you actually see the actual worship of idols, and it's very, very easy to castigate these people and say, how could they do such a thing? But little do we realize that we too have certain idols in our own lives that we do worship. There are many things that we've put before God in our lives. There are many things that are taking a priority over our lives. There are many things that take precedence before our God in our lives. In short, we have other gods before our God, or even besides our God. We have many things that we have idolized. There are things that we have trusted in. There are things that we have thought that are life to us. In fact, this time of COVID has just been a time for us to come to the realization that that these things, the things that we thought sustain us, the things that we thought we could put our trust in, the things that we have always put our trust in, suddenly can no longer sustain us, suddenly appear to be shaky. Everything that can be shaken has really been shaken, and we have come to the realization that there are things that we thought or we held on to, but cannot sustain us even in this very, very moment. Our health systems and in the developed countries, they have been hit by this COVID and are unable to even withstand what has come before them. There are things for some of us, our jobs, our source of income, we thought that is how our provision will come, but now we are suddenly realizing that, hey, wait a minute, we can lose our jobs. That thing, for those who have lost their jobs, that thing that used to sustain them is no longer there. And it's a time that we are now turning back to God Himself. We have put other things before Him. For some of us, even in terms of entertainment, and also things like soccer, the EPL could have been that God that we have set before us. And so suddenly, when there was no EPL, when everything was shut down, suddenly we realize how important those things were, and some of us maybe suffered withdrawal effects. So there are things that we have put before ourselves. There are things that have been so important to us. Sometimes it could even be our children. Sometimes it could be a relationship that we are exalting before God. Those are the things that can be idols, or we can be idols really in our own lives, like it was in the nation of Israel. And so the prophet Hosea comes with that judgment, but underlying this judgment is God's promise for restoration. God is still longing for us. God is still longing for them, going even after them, just as Hosea goes after his wife. In Hosea 4 and verse 10, it says, they will eat but not have enough. They will engage in prostitution but not increase, because they have deserted the Lord to give themselves to prostitution. They consult a wooden idol and are answered by a stick of wood. A spirit of prostitution leads them astray. They are unfaithful to their God. So in certain ways, it reflects just how we have lived our lives. We have been unfaithful to our God. We have put other things, we have made other things be so important, including even our structures as a church people, including our systems, including sometimes even our songs, our worship. We have worshipped worship. We have put other things before the Lord our God. And God is bringing us back, is pressing that reset button, is bringing us back to the heart of worship. So there are those things that we have put and have exalted before Him. Remember, I said, concerning Hosea, that he lived at the same time. His contemporary, one of his contemporaries, was the prophet Isaiah, and we'll be talking about him sometime later as we continue with our journey. But in Isaiah, very, very interesting. Isaiah in chapter 6, he begins chapter 6 by saying, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up. And you may wonder, why is it that Isaiah only saw the Lord? And he had begun prophesying in chapter 1, but it's in chapter 6 that Hosea says, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up. And when you go back to 2 Chronicles and chapter 26, you realize what kind of king Uzziah was. A powerful king. He had extended his kingdom. He had become so powerful. He had, one of the most powerful kings of Israel. He had built a strong army and had built a strong tower. He was such a powerful king, and Israel was prosperous under his regime. So I don't know what it is with Isaiah, and he probably some Bible scholars believe that probably he was even a relative of Isaiah. I don't know, but Isaiah says that in the year that king died, maybe that was an idol in Isaiah's life, and when God removed that, he was able to see the Lord high and lifted up. And my prayer is that this year, that COVID has hit us. Did you realize that 2020 can just be wiped away like that? Because of, what will be remembered of this year, 2020, is the COVID situation. But could it be that in the year that COVID struck, in 2020, somebody will say, I saw the Lord? When the idols, the things that we have worshipped and depended upon and looked upon, were all wiped away or destroyed, we saw the Lord. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord, Isaiah said. And my prayer is that in 2020, it will be said that in 2020, the year that COVID hit, I saw the Lord. So probably Uzziah the king, the powerful king, was an idol in Isaiah's life. I don't know what is an idol in your life. I don't know what has taken preeminence in your life. I don't know what it is that had taken that first place in your life. what it is that had hindered you from seeing God in your life. That could just be that idol. And so in our journey of rediscovering God, one thing that I want to leave with us this morning, even as we look at the story of Hosea, is to rediscover this loving God. Through the propensity for idolatry meant that though the propensity for idolatry meant that the Israelites lived as if they were not God's people, and though God told them as much through the birth of Hosea's third child, Lo-Ami, and that name means, for you are not my people, and I'm not your God. But he also reminded